As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Welcome to the SUPfm podcast with me, Simon Hutchinson. Every week, I chat with interesting people from the SUP world, or to people who can help us, the paddlers of the SUP tribe, to improve and to maximise our own experiences and our love of both the sport and the water. Every episode is designed to inspire or to help you get a deeper immersion into the sport through my conversations with leading athletes, scientists, explorers, TED speakers, and New York Times best-selling authors. And not forgetting some of the many insanely inspiring distance paddlers we've routinely had on the show. This week, I get to chat again with Jo Moseley, who will be no stranger to you if you've listened to episode 86, where we talked about her film Brave Enough. In this episode, we talk about her new book, Paddleboarding in Great Britain, which, as we hear, was a real mission as she took whatever opportunities she had outside of lockdowns to visit a whole spread of locations, to paddle with local experts, and to put together this guide to the best locations to visit across Great Britain. I also invited a mystery guest who featured in the book into the chat to join us partway through. So here, for her second appearance on the SUPfm podcast, is the fantastic Jo Moseley. Hi Jo, welcome back to SUPfm.
Oh, thank you so much, Simon. I'm hugely honoured to be back here. Thank you so much.
Well, we really appreciate you coming back, and although we only spoke last season, there's been so much going on for you since we had our last chat, including the very exciting release of your new book, Stand-Up Paddleboarding in Great Britain. And I think we referred to it being in the pipeline, but it's finally out there.
It is. It came out 3 weeks ago tomorrow, with amazing, wonderful welcome into the world, brilliant pre-orders. And yeah, it's been a journey in itself, but I'm just finally able just to kind of sigh, have a good sort of exhale and know that it's out there and hopefully bringing joy.
Well, it certainly does that. And I do want to talk about the book. It is a great read. But as I mentioned in our previous chat, we had a very good conversation about your film Brave Enough, which covered your journey coast to coast across the country on your paddleboard, and which was turned into a rather beautiful film by the director for it, Tam. And at the time, you were doing a lot of adventure festivals, and there were lots of showings out there, and you were doing lots of talks associated with that, and that was one of the things that you were known for. So just to sort of go back a little bit, and for the benefit of those who haven't seen the film yet, or haven't read your book yet, or haven't listened to your episode you recorded with us here at SUPfm, which is episode 86. What was it that made you set out on that first coast-to-coast adventure?
There was three things. First of all, I had the idea to paddleboard from Liverpool to Leeds almost immediately after I'd taken my first paddleboarding lesson in September 2016. I went from standing on Derwent water going, this is amazing, I love it, to, I think I'm going to paddle halfway across the country within literally weeks. I think it just had such a beautiful impact on me. But I was told when I shared the idea at Christmas parties that year that it sounded quite boring, logistically quite complex, and also too difficult for a woman of my age. So, yeah, I know. Yeah. And I wish that I'd had the confidence to say you're completely wrong, but I didn't. And so I just held that dream. I kept it like a little dream in the sort of bottom drawer of my life and just kept looking at it and nurturing it. And then in 2019, there was really two catalysts. One was that my youngest son would be going off to university, and I wanted to have a big dream to pull me to the future so that I wasn't that mum that was on the phone going, what are you having for your tea and what are you doing? Can I come visit? I wanted him and his brother to have their own adventures. And by having my adventure, I felt that I would have that to guide me and pull me to the future. And the second thing was that in the space of 6 months, I'd lost 5 girlfriends from different areas of my life, but only one of them had reached 50. And I just realized that life is just really short, really precious, and it can turn, as we know, in an instant. And I thought, if I have this dream, even just the spark of the dream, all I need to do is give myself the chance to try it, get to the start line and see what happens. And I decided that rather than just go from Liverpool to Leeds, I'd go across the country and I'd go Liverpool to Leeds on the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, then swap onto the Air and Calder navigation and go the 162 miles all the way to Goole. So in a nutshell, from being told I couldn't do it and I probably shouldn't do it to doing it in 3 years.
And it was quite an incredible journey, and a really lovely film, very much life affirming. And as you said, one of the core messages I got, which that you don't have to listen to other people's views of you and to accept them and be defined by them. It's all about having a go, and you might surprise yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And just taking that first step and then another step and then another step, not trying to see the whole journey at the outset, but just step by step, a little bit each day, and you'll get there. But yeah, all I really wanted to do was get to the start line and give myself the chance to do it and then see what happened.
So obviously I'd really recommend it because, the other things that really stood out to me is the fact that you get to experience your journey at first hand through what is a beautiful part of the world. And obviously I won't share the conclusion, but it's a very satisfying conclusion at the end of it. And when we last spoke, the film was exclusively being viewed in these adventure film festival circuits. But I understand that since then it's been put out there for general release.
Yes, it has. So it's done the sort of rounds of the festival, so to speak. And now you can rent or buy it on Vimeo, so you can watch it in the comfort of your home. And yeah, it's doing really well. And we're getting views from around the world because obviously Vimeo allows people to do that, which is really, really lovely. I didn't expect that. And people can see, beautiful north of England, wherever they're based. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No problem. And to our many listeners from across the world, if you're planning a visit to England, or at least if you want to feel like you visited England, then I'd really recommend Jo's film. And as you mentioned, it's there on Vimeo, and all links, as is traditional on this show, will be shared in the show notes. Let's have a chat about the book. So let me put you in this scenario. You're at one of the many glamorous publishing events that you go to, and you're sharing a cocktail with someone who may not have come across your book. How would you describe it to them?
Oh, what a great question. I've never been to anything glamorous and I don't drink cocktails, but thank you. What I would say is it's last summer, as we came out of lockdown, I took my wonderful paddleboard Grace and we traveled the country and we met lots of wonderful paddleboarders, the amazing paddleboarding community. And we went to lots of beautiful places all around the country and just experienced them. And I write about that in the book and I take people on the journey with us. And then there's lots of safety information and logistical information and where to buy a cake and how to be respectful of marine life. And it's just taking them on those stories and that journey with me to introduce them to beautiful places and wonderful people.
Absolutely. And it satisfies a whole load of sort of different needs, I guess, from the practical. So there's a section at the front around various aspects of paddleboarding in a practical way. But then you go into the various different locations, and what's clear in there is the level of collaboration that went on in all sections, because you had to engage with a huge number of people in order to do that. And I don't think there's more than half a paragraph which doesn't have a reference to someone who helped you to put all of that sort of stuff together. So it's a quite remarkable level of collaboration. But the first question I've got, looking at things from a sort of more logistical point of view, is how did you get to decide the places that you wanted to paddle?
Good question. So first of all, I mean, we don't have that many paddleboarding books, but we do have paddleboarding books within kayak and canoeing and paddleboarding. So I knew the locations they had been. And I thought, out of respect both to the authors and to the audiences who buy these books, I didn't want to duplicate. So I made sure that whilst I had places I wanted to go to, that I would try and have alternatives so that we weren't duplicating, and it was respectful to the authors and to the audience. And then I had this massive map that I would put on my lounge or kitchen floor and literally look at it and say, right, put little dots around the country so that I could try and cover as much of the country in the limited word count I have. And then I wanted to also be very clearly having different bodies of water. So I wanted coastal and inland, harbours, docks, locks, estuaries, salt marshes, rivers, canals, all of that, so that people could understand that paddleboarding isn't just coastal, and that there were places on their doorstep much closer to them that they could go to. And then I asked lots of people. There's a wonderful author called Matt Gambles, who's a SUP racer and SUP surfer and whitewater SUP up in Scotland. He's written a book about paddleboarding in Scotland. And I just rang him and I said, this is what I'm looking for. Can you advise me? And he was so incredibly generous. I mean, that was really a hallmark of the collaboration, the generosity of people. And he said, yes. And I was very clear that I wanted places which could absorb the numbers of people that I hope would go. So I didn't have any really environmentally sensitive places. I had places where you could get to by train or metro or bus or car, but there had to be sufficient car parking space that we didn't overload the community. And, you know, people just talked through areas with me. And then there was also where I just said to somebody, I'm coming to Cornwall. I've heard about these places. Would you suggest this or that? And again, they just advised me. I wanted that local knowledge. We always hear about local knowledge. And Annie Ridsell-Smith, who you may know from Be Super, once said to me, it can take a lifetime to get to know your local body of water. So how was I going to get to know 32 bodies of water in 5 months or 4 months? And so that local knowledge was absolutely key to me. So big picture and then honed it down, but always asking for local knowledge.
Okay, so that's how you decided the places that you were going to paddle. When did you go and do this? Because the last couple of years haven't been great for travelling and visiting. How did you manage the logistics of going to so many places within such a tight time frame?
Yeah, so we signed the contract in, I think, October 2020. And then obviously we were into lockdown 2 and lockdown 3. And I waited until I'd had my first vaccination, and people were saying to me, you know, Jo, you could travel. It's your, you know, in inverted commas, it's your job. It's your work. You could travel, you know, you could sort of legally get away with it, but it didn't feel right. That didn't feel right to me, that I would ask people to come and paddleboard with me when maybe they couldn't see their granny or their granddaughter or whatever. So I waited until I'd had my first vaccination. And so that was sort of May time. And then I just set out. And so it was sort of June, July, August and September. I think the last one was sort of mid-September. So I had to cram in quite a lot and just ask people and just say, can I come and visit? It was really, I'm quite an introvert. And so it was really quite hard to sort of say, look, can I come and visit you? And can you take me places? But again, that generosity was just extraordinary. And then some places like the Gannel and Newquay, it was basically done on the tides. Steph Barnicoat said, these are the tides, you know, the right tides for August, pick one. And so we just had to pick a date and then build Devon and Cornwall around that date.
Could I just ask you to read a little piece from the book, please?
Yeah, sure. So this is from the Ullswater chapter. And as I said, I started in the Lake District. So for me, coming back to Ullswater was really special. So writing this book has felt like writing a love letter to the beautiful places on our doorstep, our sport and the paddleboarding community that makes it so special. When my head was bursting with facts and maps, I added a note in my journal. Let the research breathe. Leave space for serendipity. This was a lesson I learned when crossing coast to coast in 2019. Chance meetings, the kindness of strangers, and magical meteorological moments along the canal enriched that experience in ways I could neither have expected nor engineered. I'm grateful that serendipity has also played a part in the journey of this book. There have been times of wonder, dolphins swimming past, watching an otter feed on the rocks, and a curious seal choosing to swim under my board. I've shared breathtaking sunrises and sunsets, the glassiest of waters along the coast, and with just the right amount of wind behind our backs, a few minutes whooshing along the water, laughing. The generosity of new friends sharing their knowledge and time has moved me to tears. There have, of course, been cancelled days, grey days and rainy days, as you have read. And there have been rainbows too.
Lovely. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you.
I won't ask you your favourite location. That's a very trite question. And I just that's so much below me. But because everywhere is different, what I did want to ask you about is where on your visit did you think I'd like to explore this location a little bit more? And what locations really surprised you? Maybe you weren't expecting to enjoy them quite as much as you did.
Wow, what a great question. Let me think. I'd love to spend, I think one of the advantages of Scotland, obviously with the right to roam, is that if you are responsible, you can stay overnight legally. And so I was bowled over by the evening that Lynn and I spent on Great Cumbrae. So we started from Porton Cross, which is believed to be the last resting place of the kings before they went off for burial in Iona. And we left from Little Castle, we passed a tiny island and then paddled round to another island, and we slept on the beach. We slept on our paddleboards. We took off the fins, put down our sleeping bags and our bivvy bags, and we slept on the beach, and that was extraordinary. So yeah, more nights under the stars on a paddleboard on a beach would be wonderful. I loved inland paddling, and I love harbours, and I love docks. And I'd been to Liverpool Albert Docks before, back in 2019, but I really wanted to show people how you can paddle in the city. So paddling, for example, in Bristol Harbour or Regent's Canal. And Regent's Canal, again, is quite a short paddle, but it's so interesting, and you are in the hustle and bustle of London life, and yet you're quite separated from it on the canal. And likewise, Liverpool Albert Docks. So it's really hard. Oh gosh, what a question. I would just love to go back to everywhere and just explore further and see it in different seasons. And that's the beauty of paddleboarding. One place can look so different in different seasons. And there were places I didn't get to that I'd like to get to, but just simply because of word count and time. I don't know if I've answered that question there.
You've answered it very fully. So you mentioned about locations you didn't get to. Just share some of those locations, and this may well set things up for a volume 2. Who knows?
Yes. I really wanted to go to Cambridge. I felt that was a place I really wanted to go to, but just we didn't have word count space. I'd like to go to do more around more cities. I'd really like to go to more cities. I'd love to go to Edinburgh. I would obviously like to explore further along the Great Glen Canoe Trail. I'd like to go back to places and just explore it in more depth. More of the canal, say in Birmingham, and just, honestly, everywhere. Everywhere I could go to. But Cambridge was one place I really, really wanted to go to, and just didn't have the space or the time.
Well, I guess that's the intention behind the book, because it's all about sparking that level of exploration out there. And it's a pretty voracious beast or sport, stand-up paddleboarding, because I know experience of a lot of people is that, once they do more, that doesn't sort of satisfy that appetite. You just want to do more and more and discover more and more areas as your skills and your discoveries increase. So that seems to be the case from your answer there as well. One of the other things in the book, and obviously something which is absolutely crucial to any form of peak sporting achievement, is nutrition and eating. And there's a practical need to identify those sorts of locations and to keep yourself properly hydrated and keep your strength up during all of these journeys that you set out on. So in terms of food highlights, you mentioned locations and so on. Where would you say your food highlights would be in the book?
When I was in Wales along the coast, I went from Llangrannog to Tresaith and back with Claire and Sarah. And we went to a gorgeous award-winning pizza place and had Guinness cake, which we shared with cups of tea, which was lovely. I had the most beautiful ice cream on Loch Tay, flapjack off Loo Island. My son and I, before I did the trip on the Regent's Canal, had a lovely Greek meal in Camden. So I did manage to kind of eat my way around. And I think that is lovely. With Sarah Perkins in Oxwich Bay, I think we had chips, although there is a Michelin star restaurant, but we didn't go there. So it was really lovely just to share that. I think having a nice meal before or after is, or a snack is lovely. With Becky Dickinson on the Exeter Shipping Canal, we went to a pub. I'd never paddled to a pub before. And obviously we didn't drink alcohol. I don't drink alcohol anyway, but we wouldn't have done that. And we had a nice lunch before our paddle along the Exeter Shipping Canal. Food did play its part. And then we had the nutritious food as well on board as well for the longer trips.
Well, it's all calories, and when you're on the water, you need those to keep you going. So that is a real feature of the book as well. So Jo, can you just tell us a bit about that front part of the book, because it's not just the locations, there's also quite a considerable amount of advice and guidance there. So how did you put that together?
So that part of it I could do in lockdown, which was a good exercise for me. And I just wanted to, as always, just have that sort of hive mind of the paddleboarding community. And so I asked some of the experts that I know, such as Brendan Prince of the Long Paddle, Ben Seal of WSA, asked Sarah Thornley for some people who she could put me in touch with about the history of paddleboarding in the UK. So Simon Bassett. And I just wanted lots of really practical information for people on kit and leashes and boards and where to paddle and the different hazards. And obviously it's not exhaustive. It's just a starting point. And then also marine life. So I did paddle with a marine ranger from the Cornwall Seal Research Group Trust. And I spoke to an ornithologist about mudflats and birds, and also Ben Seal of British Canoeing. So I just wanted to get really good information for people so that they could sort of be set up with that safety tips. And obviously, I talked to Professor Mike Tipton, basically, and I mentioned that I found him via your brilliant podcast with him. So cold water shock. Just wanted to give as much as I could in a simple form for people to go out safely. As we know, that's if we have safety at the heart of everything, then we can keep enjoying paddleboarding.
Absolutely. And there is a mix of difficulty amongst the sessions that you went out on. Obviously, you had the advantage of going out with people who knew that area, but it's kind of unique, I guess, to paddleboarding, where there is a static safety environment where all the dangers potentially are invisible. So the wind, the cold, and the various different levels of flow there. It's really important, and you've done that throughout the book to mark the level of difficulty or potential knowledge that's required in order to do those locations.
So, for example, the Great Orme, which I did with Caz Dawson of SUP LAS, was not one that I would say, just rock up and do. And I've always given people and guides and instructors locally that people could go to. And I always think if you're going to a new place, get that local knowledge. But we went from the West Shore to the North Shore around the Great Orme. But then I've put, you could just stay close by to the beach. The beach was lovely. You don't have to do this longer journey. And so I've tried to, at all places, have the beginner element and then the more advanced element, and recommend people that they could go with. And then there are some which are obviously more accessible, such as canals, Exeter Shipping Canal, Bristol Harbour, Liverpool Albert Docks. They're much more, they're not susceptible to the sort of tidal situations that you might have on the Great Orme or the Gannel or whatever. So, yeah, I've tried to offer different alternatives to people and places that they might otherwise overlook. I think canals can often be overlooked, and yet we're all, relatively close to canals. So, yeah, try to cover as many places as I could.
Amazing.
So, did you see the bit about Mull where I very deliberately said, took your advice?
Yes, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I really debated whether to put Mull in because I didn't actually paddle, but then I felt it was quite important to show how beautiful it was and give people ideas, but then also put that, I went all that way and I still didn't paddle, but that doesn't make it any less of an adventure. So, yeah, I was keen to put that in.
Excellent. Well, we've got a guest joining us. Hello, mystery guest.
Wow, that was good timing, wasn't it? I set that one up well.
Hi, Caz. We've just been talking about you. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. And I was saying to Jo that for such a collaborative book, it made perfect sense to have some of the collaboratees on here. So really appreciate you joining us.
No, thank you, Simon. And hello again, Jo. Oh, yes. It was, wow. I'm still kind of blown away, really, to have been part of the book and to have met Jo and to have, got out on some of those paddles, really, and have the pleasure of guiding and sharing some of the areas that I really love in North Wales. So, great. Thanks for inviting me on. It's great to see you again.
Oh, sweet. What a reunion.
This is the SUPfm podcast with my guest, Jo Moseley, and we'll be right back. As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Now for the rest of my conversation with Jo Moseley. The reunion episode, definitely, because obviously, Caz, you've been on the podcast before, and we'll share the link to your episode as well. So it's great to have you back on in all areas. Now, one of the things that I picked up in the book is that Jo stayed with you when she did your North Wales excursions. That was Bala Lake and Llandudno. So I'm incredibly indiscreet, possibly, but what's the goss on Jo as a house guest? Were there any smashed up bedrooms, televisions thrown through windows, anything like that?
Oh, it was really raucous, Simon. I couldn't control her. She was a pleasure. My border terrier in particular, Spud, took a real shine into Jo. And we sat out and we had supper and we were in the garden, and it was just lovely. And the evening she stopped over was actually it was midsummer's. It was actually 12 months ago to the day, pretty much. It was midsummer's midsummer's evening, we went out for a very, very long paddle on the River Dee. Actually, no, I do remember what happened, because we went for a really long paddle. I remember, Jo, you saying to me, this is well past my bedtime. We were still on the river at 10:30 at night, and came back, and I think it was either a piece of toast or some cereal that I fed you. So I was really bad as a guest. It wasn't actually a nice spread outside, now I come to think about it.
It was the next day when we went to Clintegard.
Yeah.
We did have a nice spread then.
We
So
did.
yeah, food plays a big part. Anywhere with Caz, there's always going to be a Kelly kettle and some cookies.
Well, I wanted to come on to that. I wanted to come on to that a little bit later, because Caz, as Jo said, you've got a bit of a reputation as a bit of a foodie in the wild. So I do want to ask you about that. But Lake Bala and Llandudno, in terms of difficulty, Jo's already referred to the differences between those two locations. They are very, very different. How would you describe those two locations in terms of knowledge required in order to paddle them?
I think with both sets of water, neither are to be taken lightly. Bala Lake or Clintegard, does have a reputation of sort of winds whipping up, and it does really blow down the lake when it wants to. But in terms of sort of probably more of a beginner's introductory paddle, Bala Lake, you can kind of play quite close to the foreshore, making sure, as you say, the winds play ball. There are kind of people around. There's a jetty, there's a car park. It's easy accessible. So it is a place that you could go in North Wales, similar to sort of other very famous spots like Llyn Padan, a little bit quieter perhaps, that can give you that opportunity really to get out in a safer sort of enclosed environment. Llandudno and the Great Orme is certainly a paddle not to be taken lightly. It's one that I've paddled numerous times and paddled in various different conditions, and for me to kind of gain my sort of knowledge and skill set. So it's not one I would say, if you've just bought a board to be sort of jumping out on and heading off around. It's a very committing paddle. There's not many outs on that particular trip. So it's lots of cliffs and different things. There's some interesting sort of tidal features that around the kind of headlands in sense of sort of tidal races and how the water behaves and the currents and things. So it's certainly one I would say is get a guide, or certainly build up a knowledge and a skill set to a level that you feel sort of competent to run that paddle. And again, safety's key on both of those in terms of what you're wearing and comms and et cetera. So two very different paddles, but part of the reason, I think it just shows how diverse the region of North Wales is.
Absolutely, and stunningly beautiful. And there was a word that was introduced to me. I mean, I'd encountered the effect, but is this right? Clapotis?
Clapotis, yeah.
Do you know what? I went onto YouTube because I didn't want to make a fool of myself to work out what the pronunciation is, and they had some really weird American pronunciation of it. So I was none the wiser once I'd listened to that. So would you like to just explain what that is?
Well, you see it quite a lot around the Great Orme, and particularly it's kind of where waves hit a particularly sort of solid vertical sort of piece of kind of shoreline really. So it could be a cliff, it could be a harbour wall, it could be some sort of flood defence, for example, and it's where the waves hit, and as they hit, they kind of come back on themselves, and they basically sort of hit the incoming wave. So it almost creates like a kind of crosshatch, really, of waves cutting across. So where you would have waves just coming from one direction, they're coming from both directions, and they make almost, I describe it like a sort of like a check effect of waves going across, which makes for quite interesting and fruity paddling. So it's not an easy one to paddle because everything's coming from different directions. And obviously the bigger the waves, the bigger the returning waves. So your Clapotis can be quite challenging paddling conditions at times.
And then just moving on to Bala Lake, I was rather concerned to see the Teggy monster being mentioned there. So I think it's really important that we sort of flag that as a potential danger. Could you just explain the Teggy monster, please?
Well, I was introduced to the Teggy monster when I was probably, I must have been about 9-10 years old. And I went on a school trip to Glantlyn on the edges of Bala Lake. And they scared us half to death with this monster, which is probably Nessie's younger sort of Welsh sister, I think. Or it could be a brother. But yeah, Tegid was this monster that lived in the depths of Bala Lake that would come out and grab you when you were on your little raft when you're in Glantlyn. So it's kind of sort of hung about really, and I think it's just used to scare a lot of children, and perhaps it could be a safety thing to stop them running into the water and getting up to no good. But yeah, Tegid and the Teggy monster. I've yet to see him or her, but I do believe they're in the depths somewhere. We didn't see Jo, did we? No,
we didn't.
I'm glad you both survived the Teggy monster. And Jo, we talked a little bit earlier on about food and so on. I understand that, as you've mentioned, that the Kelly kettle was liberally used, and there was some cake just as a power up involved in certainly one of those sessions.
Yes, always a nice hot chocolate and cookies or cakes. Yeah, you never go hungry when you're with Caz. It's lovely. It just adds to it, doesn't it? It just adds. And actually, we have to say that when we did stop for our snack, going around the Great Orme, we also did a litter pick, didn't we? Because there was some barbecue, old barbecues there. So I think that we made a difference, and then we had a little snackette and then went on our way.
Very, very important. And just on that subject, Caz, I noticed from some of your more recent...
That's it. Yeah. That's Spud chasing a crow. No.
We've been there. So Jo's got seagulls in the background. They're a little less biddable to sort of quieten down. So
they have quietened down.
They have, haven't they? They obviously know there's a recording session going on. But Caz, I noticed from some of your recent social media posts, you've sort of doubled down on your culinary escapades. And there was a particular a session where you went through an entire menu which you produced out there in the wild on one stove. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's something I've been trying to pin down for the last couple of years, and I think with the business and everything kind of going, I just haven't had that kind of the thinking and the time and the space to be able to do it. So a few weeks ago, and we were probably on our second or third attempt just because of the weather, I managed to get a local adventure photographer, a girl called Harry, to come out with me. And we went out, and I said, look, let's just throw everything in the kitchen sink in this. Let's see what we could do. And I think we were out in the water for about 10 hours. I would say about 4 or 5 of those was cooking, eating, more photographs, cooking, eating, more photographs. So we went out and we brought all of the ideas that I had. We actually brought them to fruition. We found a wonderful location. And we just thought, what could we do? So we took lots of different cooking stoves and bits of kit, and the Kelly kettle all went out. And we just had a great time cooking up lots of local and seasonal Welsh ingredients to kind of showcase really what is possible on a paddleboard. And I think, we can do much better than a curled up ham sandwich. And I think we could go out and even just making some very simple, kebabs on a little sort of pita bread kind of wrap. Things like that are so easy to do that, just with a little bit of thought, a little bit of kit, and we've got the most perfect vehicle, which is a paddleboard, to be able to carry that little bit of extra weight to being on our backs. I think we should really try and celebrate and go out and try and up our sort of culinary game really. So that was kind of the purpose of it, and it sort of tied in what I did previously and still do now in terms of my sort of food and drink consultancy work. It ties all that in so nicely. So it just makes people smile. And I took my first commercial trip out last week with it, and the feedback we had, the smiles, the engagement, people sort of taking all of those skills away and trying different things. So that's what I want to do, is just inspire people to just push the boundaries a bit really, and use that paddleboard as that vehicle to extend their culinary adventures.
Well, there was a mouth-watering menu in there, and I'll include the link to your post. But you had your test tour on the D for SUP foodies, fully catered. and hopefully that will be able to be opened up for other people this year, obviously weather depending.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be putting some dates out. I think I've put already a date out for next month. But yeah, just keep watching. I'm sure there'll be plenty other dates. And I've also been working with some other instructors as well to try and help them with extending their knowledge, and they're offering different things across the UK. So that's been really exciting too.
Wonderful. And then just getting back to the book, I presume you've received your copy of that. There we go, just showing on the camera there. So are there any locations there that have really sparked up an interest?
Well, I think the area that I would really like to paddle, and I think there's some really good locations in this book, and an area I'm not that familiar with really is probably the southwest. So sort of looking down more in that sort of the Cornwall, Devon, that location. And it'd be great to try and get there back end of the summer, sort of early autumn when it quietens down a little bit. And then the other one is up in Scotland it's Lynn, isn't it, with the micro adventures? Yeah. So I'd love to get up to see Lynn. We've got sort of a Kelly Kettle in common, and I think we could maybe share some stories there. So getting up to Scotland, and I think the southwest at some point this year would be a great thing to do. But all of the trips that Jo's outlined in here, they're just so clear, so well written. It's lovely to see, some of the paddles that, some of my friends and fellow instructors have put in, and there's just so much there. And already I've been hearing about instructors and people, we talk about Jo signing the book, but people have already come up and said, can you sign the page that you put that trip on? And I know Craig had, I know Claire, people are kind of like bagging signatures depending on where they've been, and if they can hook up with the instructors that went out with Jo. So it's lovely that it's kind of carrying on that community really, and people are seeing it as almost like a little tick off. They're going around the country and using it for that little bit of inspiration. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really occurred to me as well, because then it turns into what is it, in the Lake District you bag the
Wainwrights,
and it sort of turns into a self-contained little game. So we've got some Moseleys to on here, obviously.
Bagging, yeah. And I forgot, we were just thinking about food when I went over to see Sam Rutt, who's been on your podcast, hasn't she, Simon?
She has, yeah.
Wonderful. She always gives people a little box of Fortnum and Mason chocolates afterwards. So yeah, everywhere you go, there's food and paddleboarding. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's incredible how these connections fit together, because I was on the beach yesterday, met one of Sam Rutt's racing clients there, and we had a really long chat. And that was a really good session as well for you, Jo, wasn't it? Because that was Wells by the Sea, wasn't it? That looked beautiful. That was a salt marsh paddle.
Oh, just stunning, absolutely stunning. And I'd heard about Sam and sort of read about her location, and there's this beautiful, beautiful lifeboat horse sculpture that was commissioned. And then once the art commission had finished, the town bought it, and it sits on the sand just opposite sort of the harbour wall. And when the tide rises, it's like this horse is walking through the water, and it's all to reflect the RNLI heritage of the town. And it was just so unbelievably stunning. So I really went for that. And then we went through the salt marshes, and we saw the samphire and the sea lavender. And yeah, it was just incredible paddleboarding with Sam, who's obviously just so highly accomplished as a racer, and her adventures. And the whole thing was just extraordinary. And yeah, I'd never walked in sands that was so soft as in Wells. And I wanted lots of different, everywhere I went that had any RNLI heritage, I wanted to include that, or any link to the RNLI, and talk about the boats in Salcombe, and yeah, anywhere that there was an RNLI connection, I wanted to explore that as well, because obviously we're all so incredibly grateful to them for looking, after people on the sea, and I've got a massive family connection to the RNLI. So yeah, that was a really special place.
Well, it's fantastic. Thank you, Caz, so much for coming on, supporting the episode, supporting Jo. And as I said, the collaboration and the shared aloha of the sport really shines out, both in the work that you do, Jo, and also the collaborators on the book. So obviously all links will be there in the show notes to everything that we've discussed. As we know, stand-up paddleboarding in Great Britain is a bucket list of fantastic locations to browse through when you're off the water, wherever you are in the world. Jo, Caz, thank you so much. And Jo, where can people buy your book?
It's in lots of independent bookshops and stores like Waterstones. It's also available from Vertebrate Publishing, directly my publishers, and then Amazon, bookshop.org. So yeah, or me. People can buy it from me too. But yeah, there's lots of the normal places. So, and lots of lovely, lovely independent bookshops that I'm doing little book festival talks with too.
Fabulous. Jo, Caz, great to catch up with you both and look forward to seeing you on the water.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Simon. And yeah, I'm sure I'll speak to you soon.